So one thing that was very reassuring to see in the month of March when it comes to new Nintendo Switch Online updates was the quick additional Game Boy Advance games in the form of Metroid Fusion launching into the service on March 9th. As if you looked at history when it came to the addition of N64 support for NSO expansion pack, we did have a couple month gap before we started seeing Nintendo stick to that somewhat consistent once per month new N64 game edition. And while any N64 games have yet to be unveiled for the current month of March, and whether or not they will be unveiled remains to be seen, as we very well could be shifting to a every other month scenario, with Nintendo choosing to rotate out which major platforms get the updates, like Game Boy Advance in March and then N64 in April. In today's video, we do need to discuss a very fascinating data mine that all but confirms a fan favorite game that will be added in at some point in the future, and we need to go over all the exact details of what's been spotted here and what to expect when it comes to future NSO updates right now. What's up, Nation? If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below, hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. And as I mentioned, guys, today we are discussing Nintendo Switch Online, which over the course of history is a service I have had a very love-hate relationship with, because typically when Nintendo adds in a major new feature or console support, we see them focus on that new update with a lot of frequent content month in and month out. And while they've never committed to a consistent update roadmap schedule, or even just communicate to us, the consumer, any kind of set update schedule, and that's still something I would love to see change, but it does create a lot of excitement and surprise when we do get out of the blue announcements that we have a brand new game being dropped into the service, or sometimes multiple games over the course of time. But where the service is often frustrating is once a platform is well established and Nintendo has kind of added their main AAA hitters to a particular console, we oftentimes see support dwindle, just as you can look towards the NES and SNES library of games on the base tier service today. Can we expect more Game Boy games to be added into the base tier, as that is the most recent update from Nintendo around their lower price subscription option? Yes, I do believe that we will get a handful of Game Boy games for the foreseeable future, maybe before we ever even see any kind of additional support for NES and SNES games. One thing we don't know at all is what the N64 update roadmap schedule will look like now that the Game Boy Advance system is being supported in the expansion pack tier of the service. And I've been saying it in just about all of my Nintendo Switch Online focused videos, where that word gradually was used at the September Nintendo Direct, which was the last time we got a updated look at future N64 games that would be added into the service. And I do now believe more than ever, with the Game Boy family of systems actually having support and ongoing updates live as of now, that we are likely in a tick-tock cycle, which essentially means in the month of March, the Game Boy Advance game being Metroid Fusion is our game, and maybe something in April will be an N64 game and not a Game Boy Advance game. In a perfect world, they would do at least one new Game Boy Advance and N64 game per month. But we are talking about Nintendo here, and clearly nothing is predictable with them. They're even getting wildly inconsistent with adding N64 games at a one per month pace, and that's where I'm personally setting my expectations around future updates. However, one thing we do have to look forward to now is a potential leaked title that will be added into NSO, specifically on the Game Boy Advance in the future, which, as I mentioned, I was very relieved to see a very quick turnaround time on the first additional game that was being added into that system. And you can argue that yes, it launched with a very light library of games, and maybe that's why Nintendo needed to push out a game so soon after the service was confirmed and launched in the month of February, but it was still a relief for me to see Metroid Fusion playable right now on the service. Not to mention, that was a highly anticipated title for me. It's a classic, instant classic. Go play it if you haven't already. If you enjoyed Metroid Prime Remastered for the first time, maybe you're newer to the Metroid series, or if you got into Dread but didn't go through all of the backlog Metroid games, it is absolutely worth booting up and going through from start to finish. A 10 out of 10 game in my personal opinion. And once upon a time, we had a little bit of a heads up or advance notice on when Nintendo would be adding in new games to the service, because a maintenance bot over on Twitter was able to spot maintenance ahead of time when it was happening to the applications, always leading people to believe that when we saw N64 go down for maintenance, that there would shortly thereafter be an announcement of a new game. And surprisingly, Nintendo has figured out how to dodge that indicator, because over all of the various last updates that we've seen hit the service, we have not noticed that same trend where the bot spots it ahead of time. So I do believe that Nintendo deliberately dodges the public maintenance check, where we can't see when they're doing behind the scenes updates anymore to the applications, at least in terms of new games, until they actually choose to make the update go live and push it to our consoles. And to first get on the same page with what game in question are we talking about that has leaked in terms of being a for sure title that will be added into NSO in the GBA library in the future, let's quickly hop over to Go Nintendo, where they break down and highlight an interesting data mine that has leaked out this update. Nintendo Switch Online data miner finds Metroid Zero mission screenshots, evidence of link cable support, a new mission on the horizon. Metroid Fusion just arrived for Nintendo Switch Online last week, and now it seems that the Game Boy Advance follow-up, Metroid Zero Mission, is on its way too. Data miner Luigi Blood took a close look into NSO's files and discovered some tantalizing tidbits. First, there are screenshots of Metroid Zero Mission hidden away in Metroid Fusion subfolders. This seems like a strong indication that Zero Mission will be added to the service sometime in the future, though it's hard to say exactly when. More surprisingly though, is the fact that these screenshots include specific instructions on how to use the game's link cable functionality. In fact, similar instructions were discovered for every game on the service that originally included those capabilities. You can then see Luigi Blood's tweet, which outlines more people are taking notice of this. Some may think these are just random screenshots because they don't modify the games and stuff, but these are definitely screenshots for how to use the link instructions by their file names. He then goes on to detail, I do not have an English screenshot on hand, but no joke, they wrote instructions on how to use the link feature for every game where you can do that for both Game Boy and Game Boy Advance NSO. These screenshots would be used here. Making use of the linking function between games can unlock bonus features such as an art gallery when connecting Zero Mission and Fusion to each other. This is a good sign that Nintendo is planning on utilizing these features in current and future Game Boy and Game Boy Advance releases on Nintendo Switch Online. Hopefully we will learn more soon about how it will work and which games will be included. Pokemon perhaps? So I do personally believe that this is an indication that we can expect Metroid Zero Mission to be added into Nintendo Switch Online for the Game Boy Advance in the future. It is just a likely title to make it over to begin with. It's not on the current roadmap of games, which begs the question, when will we see this title added in? But it's even a title that we saw support for on the Virtual Console most recently in the Wii U form, and I think it's just a staple, simple title for Nintendo to port over and add it to the service, and that link cable functionality is going to be a really cool thing to dive back into and relive once again. I have some memories of playing through Metroid Prime on the GameCube and having the Game Boy Advance cable able to plug into that. Something happened with an art gallery. Definitely let me know in the comments down below if you remember the ins and outs of how that worked together, because I do remember unlocking certain things from playing one alongside the other, but it's been so long, over 20 years now, that I can't remember exactly what the entire process was. But I'm absolutely here for the Nintendo Switch being a Metroid machine through and through. All of 1 through 5 are now going to be playable in a very great form. We do need Samus Returns to make it over in its 3DS remake form at some point, maybe as a port. That's probably wishful thinking. But between that and the heavily rumored Prime 2 and 3 remaster or HD edition likely coming in the build up to Metroid Prime 4, this is literally a Metroid powerhouse machine. We definitely need to get to the same point with the Legend of Zelda series. There's tons of Legend of Zelda games you can play, but the big ones we're missing are Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. So why Nintendo continues to hold those back, who knows? It would also be great to play the 3D versions of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask instead of having to rely on just the N64 vanilla versions. But all of that said, the Nintendo Switch, as it continues to build out this library of consoles 4 different rotating libraries that we are getting worked on and added into NSO at the same time. I think it definitely sends a good message for the overall value proposition of this service, and that controversial $50 annual asking price is looking better and better when we are getting consistent updates and support for a fantastic library of games around N64, GBA, Game Boy Color, Sega Genesis, and hopefully we start to see NES and SNES love show up once again in the near future. And if we're lucky, maybe I'm wrong about the alternating month updates, and I would love to be wrong about that, and hopefully we could still see something like an N64 game added in the month of March, disproving that theory, and then maybe we can start to look towards 2 mainline major games hitting the expansion pack tier, and then hopefully a couple rotating Sega Genesis and Game Boy updates and NES and SNES throughout. But I really want to hear from you guys at this point in the video, your thoughts on this particular leak. Do you think that this is indeed revealing that, yes, Nintendo has Metroid Zero Mission planned for the service, and it might be around the corner soon once the existing roadmap of GBA games gets finished out? And how do you feel about Metroid Zero Mission being added into the service? Because I can't recommend that game enough. It's the original Metroid game in its finest form. They added in so many things and truly took the experience to a whole nother level. And also share with me, what do you think the frequency of updates will be around Nintendo Switch Online now that we have these 6 different consoles getting updates potentially at the same time, although NES and SNES are a total question mark, so it might only be 4. But what do you think the actual update cadence looks like from Nintendo? Is it going to be alternating months where we get a GBA game one month, an N64 game the next month, but never in the same month? Or do you think Nintendo will just be totally random and sporadic with this thing? Or are you very optimistic and you think there's actually a strong possibility that we get a GBA game and an N64 game each calendar month going forward? And bonus question, let me know which games from those libraries or any different libraries you hope we see added into NSO the most. So regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch yesterday's video next if you haven't already, which is on screen right now. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.